Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome to your lighting critique. For today, we're going to start off by answering a few questions before getting into the images. The first question was from Diana. So the question was, how do you light a sequence in which the characters are moving? And, like she was wondering, do you animate the lights? Do you keep the lights the same and actually animate the characters through the scene? The best example that I can give on that is a couple of sequences that I worked on for the film Spies in Disguise recently. So there's this one that I was a lighting artist on. The sequence was led by Haji Usato, who is an incredibly talented man and lighting artist. He's one of my mentors in the industry, and I wanted to give him a shout out for the incredible work he did there. The other is a sequence that I led, which is this car chase, which ended up being it was a collaboration with Audi to kind of to showcase their car a little bit. And so both of these, this is a daytime version of this. There's a nighttime version of this, which is from the film. And so I just kind of wanted to talk through the way that we did some of this stuff. So this would be a good time for me to mention the disclaimer that any opinions that I give in this is my own. I am not in these videos. I'm not representing Disney or any of the work that I do for the Disney Animation Company. Again, these are just my own personal opinions, and due to the non-disclosure agreements that I've signed on the projects I've worked on, I will not go into super detail, but just talk about things in very general terms. So, overall, all that being said, overall, when you're working on a sequence like this, just so you guys know how they're set up, generally speaking, they are set up in a way where they're pretty realistic, right? Like when you got a car driving through a city like this, you actually set up a city that is the same from shot to shot. You actually move a car along. You cut the shots together from you put them over a timeline, over a very long timeline. And just have them kind of sequentially go through, and then you break up all that movement into a shot-by-shot basis. That will really help you maintain continuity from shot to shot, so that the key light doesn't flip from one side of the building to the other, or things don't get too mixed up. So that's generally how we set that up. In terms of the setup of the lights, so basically on shots like this, we did a bunch of tests with the key light in different positions and determined that this was the best one, because the main thing that we were looking for was trying to create a sense of daytime, but also a sense of movement. And by doing that, and what we did was we wanted to get these shadows scraping across the street, so that as the car moved along, it could go into light and shadow, and that would help get the intensity of the speed that they were going to really play out. Like stuff like that, and zipping along and then getting out of the shadow this way. It just created a little bit more of a dynamic lighting setup. Now, in terms of the actual, looking at some of the lighting, let's go here towards the end. So there's actually, there's a bunch of light sources. There's the light that's hitting the street. There's the light on the characters. There's inside the car, there's some dashboard light. So one of the things that we see when we look at car lighting is that, depending on the position of the sun, it's actually more likely that the characters are going to be lit from outside the window, on the window side of them, just because that's where the light's coming through, even when it's bouncing off of buildings. That's generally where it is. One of the other big things is we want to get those lights to kind of go in and out of light and shadow. You want them to you want it to feel dynamic. You don't want the light to be too static on them. So you'll have, pockets of light going past them. You want to make sure to get some reflections on the windshield going up this way. You just want to feel that light passing over top of them. And the way that you do that is you actually move the characters to the set and keep the camera, or keep the lights pretty static. And in this case, the camera is parented to the car. Now, if there are any lights like headlights, tail lights, interior lights, the glow off of this dashboard, the glow off of this up underneath the hands, all that stuff is going to be parented to the car. The way that this light coming out of the helicopter bay is parented to the helicopter. So really, it's just a matter of determining what lights need to be dynamic and which ones need to be static. Additionally, there's some stuff that we did that I'm pretty proud of. Some little things like you can find, reflections from these windows back onto the street there, which I noticed when I was walking around New York with my kid strapped to my chest. On a bright sunny day, I've got tons of pictures on my phone of just that type of reference. So next time you're in a city, pay attention to that. There's very cool refractions on the ground from that kind of stuff. Now, this sequence is a bit trickier because, in a daytime scenario, you just have like one, you just have a big key light coming down there, and that's all you have to worry about. This stuff, like, look, there's all these lights here, there's lights here, there's lights inside the buildings, there's lights lighting up, this Capitol building, there's headlights on the cars, there's interior lights, there's soon-to-be flashing police lights. All of that stuff needed to be taken into consideration. So, like the police lights needed to be animated in such a way, like, we need to get lights here, there's lights in the top, there's lights in the back, there's headlights, there's taillights, again, lights here, lights inside these buildings, various lights inside all these stores, lights on the buildings, lights, you had to get her eyeglasses to go on her eye. He's got a laptop on his chest, he's got to get that up in there. We've got light kind of shining in from back behind him. So all of these shots needed all of that, and you needed to make sure that the lighting wasn't so overwhelming that, it just couldn't flood out the scene. Like, all of these up here had to be placed, and we did that systemically, like with some scripting and stuff like that, so that we didn't have to hand place each one of those. But every single one of these shots, you needed to balance all of that lighting into it. So it's a matter of, and to answer your question, it's really a matter of determining which lights are static, in that the characters are going to pass through them, which lights are visually static in the scene, which ones are parented to the car, like these lights here, again, from the dashboard stuff, and then additionally, which ones, like the flashing police lights, aren't always technically accurate, because we wanted to make sure to get the dynamic element onto the scene. So, like, in a shot like this, if you think about it, there's no, like, all the lights should be coming, actually they're there, but like, they should be always behind them. But we did creep the flashing police lights around, like, onto their faces a little bit, just to create the scene, make the scene a little bit more dynamic. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Diana. And let me know if you have any questions about that. But that's the general gist of that. So yeah, it's done much more like a live action set than you would ever need to take into consideration, or than you would ever think would be the case. Okay, so there's that one. Hopping over into another question here from Adrian. So the question came up about how would you light a scene like this, like a hallway scene. And so you've got these overhead panels of light. Like, these are our light sources, right? And from a technical standpoint, what you want to do is, like, you want these to be, like, see how they're kind of glowy? That's going to be done more in the materials and in the comp to kind of create that look. So, because you want to separate what the lights look like from what the lights are doing. So in this case, the lights look glowy, and they look bright, and they look like there's a light source back behind them. That can be done through emission. Sometimes you want to use a mesh light, but those can get kind of noisy. So I like to use just a little bit of internal glow on the shader itself to kind of get that, and then boost that in the comp. So that's step one. Step two is how these lights are affecting the scene, because you can play with that, right? Like, even though the light looks like that, it could, like, these could be area lights that are this big, and they would create much smaller pockets of light, allowing the characters to pass through light and shadow. Or they can be like, like one light that's that big that creates a very large, soft, diffuse look to the scene. And that's going to create something that's a little more ho-hum, a little more mundane, a little less exciting. So in this particular case, she's just sad that this boy didn't recognize her. And so for that, they didn't, it's not a chase sequence. She doesn't need to go into light and shadow. So you can see that all the lights are very soft. So my guess is there's probably some area lights up here that are pretty big, that are shining down and creating like some subtle light to shadow differences. But like, look at the ground here. There's a little bit of light that creeps in here, but the difference between the light color and the shadow color is very, very, very subtle. It's all about just kind of, creating that soft lighting effect that's not too dynamic. So my determination for you and my advice to you is, if you're going to be doing some lighting like this, is to pay attention to those two things. Number one, how you want the lights to look, and two, how you want the lights to behave in the scene, and what kind of emotional reaction you're trying to get from the audience there. Okay, question 3 comes from Forrest, and Forrest wants to know, you've got these kind of like very dark elements down here, and how to get rid of those. Excellent question. So the number one thing that I always say in these situations is to take a look at your raw renders and see if there is value in the raw render. And if there is, you've got some room to work with, because that means that what's getting very dark there is actually being done in the composite, right? Like, it's either adding some ambient occlusion, or it's just some color tweaks or something that's creating the additional darkening. That's step 1. So that being said, if you're like, okay, I checked that and my actual raw renders, it looks this dark. Okay, then you're on to the next step. Next step is, how do you brighten that up? You can create lights that are underneath the floor that ignore the ground plane, that kind of come up here. And you can do that as a spotlight or an area light or whatever you choose. And kind of hit some more bounce light up underneath there that'll simulate more light coming into this region. That's one way to do it. Another way you can do it is you can... So ambient occlusion is also often used for contact shadow, right? It's often thought of as contact shadow, but in reality, it doesn't necessarily need to be. All ambient occlusion is an image that gives you a 0 to 1 range, a value range of things that are close together. So the darker it is, the closer objects are together. Now, often you can use that as shadow, but you can use it for other means too. So if this is an EXR image and there is some value in there, but you just want to make it brighter, what you can do is you can take the ambient occlusion, which would be, like lighter in here and darker down there, and invert the image, right? So now the areas down here, which are close together, are now like 1, and they will go up here to 0, right? So because now it's inverted, where normally this is white and this is dark. You can invert that. Okay, so now what do you do with that? Now you've got this inverted ambient occlusion. You can use that as an alpha channel into a grade node and lift this up a little bit, and then create some more light in there just inside those contact points. Now that only works if you have an EXR image or something that actually has some value in there, because like if I took this JPEG image, I haven't tested this yet, but I'm assuming this is what's going to happen, and I like expose this up, we're never really going to see any value in there, because I'm trying to lift up, because this is trying to lift a value that's 0, 0, 0. And when you're trying to lift 0, 0, 0, usually, especially if you're doing like some sort of multiplier of it, that's not what I want. If you're doing like something like a lightness thing, well, this is just plussing it. That's not what we want. It's brightness contrast. I guess there isn't a hotkey for that. So if I'm just trying to lift this and multiply this up, it's not going to increase anything, because you multiply 0 by anything, it's just going to remain 0. So you want to make sure that you're getting some value in there, which you probably do in an EXR file. Okay, so that's my bit of advice there. Let me know if you have any questions on that. I know that you've been working with Michael Callahan, who's fantastic at this stuff, and he could probably give you another solution too if outside of what I've said. Okay, so now I want to hop into the images themselves. Adrian, again, this is looking great. There is some translucency in there, some subsurface scattering in there. It's very, very cool. I do think that these, the hands of these guys can go brighter and more saturated. Like, I feel like you can lift these up. Oh, my daughter agrees too. She's very into that. And then you can, let's see, we can just increase the saturation just a little bit more. So that the hands, because like I get that they're in shadow, and your instinct is right there, but like these are Legos, man. They need to be yellow. This is like think of these guys as like the Minions or like Shrek, and that yellow color really is their hero color, and we need to keep them on there. And we can put that down just a little bit. But overall, we do want that in there, right? So you want those to be a little bit brighter. Additionally, one thing you may want to do is, let's see, and let me go ahead and include these two. Is I'm seeing this yellow color, and I'm wondering if we can't. It's feeling a little bit on the green side, and I'm wondering if we shift it a little more orangey. Like so, pulling out some of the green value. And let's just see if this is how we like that. Take out some of these areas in the middle so I don't cloud our judgment. Something like this. So just a touch more red, a little less green, maybe a little more yellow into those as well. But you are very, very, very close. Again, these are very minor notes. So really good job. So keep going there. Alfredo, this is looking great. I love like the subtle peach fuzz on her skin. I think that's looking really great. You've got some... Sorry, my daughter's really into this new teething toy. Okay, so you've got some really great elements here. Like again, I love this kind of like what I call the sunlight underskin burn, like that little bit of red right on the edge of the shadow. I think that's looking great. Paint out these couple stray hairs. I think that'll help out a lot. In terms, there's like all the skin, all that stuff looks great. The only areas that I think we can do a little bit more work on the eye. I think that we can get some more eye white in there. I think that your eye dings are good, but they're a little asymmetric. Like this one's a little bigger and offset. This one's smaller and on there. I think you can make them both a little bit bigger and make them right there on the iris to pupil connection point. Additionally, because of this line, it feels like there's a window over here. So I would consider making them like little window reflections or some sort of like reflection simulating what that light is over there. I think you can, like similar to how you have this kind of subtle redness in there, I think you can get the same thing inside the nostrils and a little bit of warmth on the fill side. Because actually, if I look down the edge, like right here, it almost looks like there's like a black outline right there and there. And I just want to get a little more value and a little more warmth in there. So same thing here, like a little bit of warmth as the lips touch together. But other than that, I think this is looking really, really good. I think this is very, very cool. Ashley, all right, good progress. Like the specularity on her skin looks really good. It's a little bit tight right here in the cheek. Just like a nudge, like making it just a little bit bigger would be really good. Depth of field looks good. I think that you can get some more translucency if you can, like light shining through the top here. Just like a little bit of lifted value on there so it doesn't quite feel so thick. And then watch out, there's like some really sharp shapes down in here, especially like if you scroll down here. Oof, jump like that. So like you can see some in here. So I'm not quite sure what's causing those. It might be like right there. It might be some like depth of field issues. Not incredibly sure. So in like right down the edge here. So just watch out for those. If that is the case, if that is Z depth issues, you may need to render some elements separately and then piece them together. So like rendering the flowers separately so that you can get a nice clean edge. Because the reason why I say that is if you have like, let's say you're trying to get an edge, like the depth of field edge between like, I'm trying to think, like these flowers and then this background. What ends up happening is like the external edges here are super clean and crisp and perfect and like pixel perfect. But these internal edges, then you're just relying on Z depth data to distinguish what's these flowers and what's these leaves back here because you don't actually have the alpha edge and it can get a little janky in there. So that's something to watch out for. Same thing like along her edge here. There's some brighter, bright spots there. In terms of the lighting itself, you're doing a good job of getting more light coming in this way and really feeling that on the character. Now, I would try and get a very subtle rim light on the back side of her just to get her to pop off a little bit from the background. And, you know, we've got all these like super saturated kind of cooler colors in the sky. Maybe try working that, maybe not necessarily into the, you know what, into the tree. Let's try working some of these cooler, maybe into her skin here. Just try, see if you like it. If not, we can always pull it back. But try and maybe add a little bit more of these cooler elements, like definitely into this plant, back here into those fill values to really kind of help that out. But I think that would be a really good next step for you there. All right, Dana. Very cool. Yes. So I'm assuming this is cloudy with a chance of meatballs. I could be very wrong, but I think that's what this is. So yeah. So pretty bright key light, as you mentioned. We've got a key light coming in here. You mentioned this line between them, which is true. Notice the subsurface scattering right here on the edge of this. Well, I'm assuming that's cake. And the main objects are dark surrounded by light. That's true, but they're also using a lot of saturation, like very saturated elements to create them to pop off from the background. So really pay attention to the saturation points on some of this stuff because it is very candy coated, but not quite like it's not quite super 100% red. But like again with this film, it's all about like feeling like artificial colors and flavors and candy. So really getting that. I also want you to notice this the pinkish hues in the clouds and the sky color is very interesting. Let's see, foreground darker, light star. Yeah, so really this darkness down here is to serve two purposes. One is to draw our eye back here, and two is to create more shaping because this is very flat in here. So just to create some more shaping in here. And then let's see what else. Yeah, so saturation points, shaping, and then like there's just no super, like the darkest that anything really gets is like inside these doorways, and even that's got a little bit of a haze to it because it's a little bit further off in the distance. So just like light, bright, glowy, happy, kid friendly, huge color pops going across the screen there, I think would be the way to go. So really good job there. All right, Diana. So we've got a couple images here from you and some reference. So you mentioned, I think you can even go brighter in this lamp. Like if it was me, I would go brighter right here in the middle. Like even somewhere in this region to simulate the idea that there's a bulb in there, right? Oh, that's not good. Make this smaller. I mean, let's do this more. Just get that being a little bit brighter. And then that bulb element on top. Screen that on top. There we go, something like that. I would consider going even a little bit brighter, like something along those lines. Let's tone that down, maybe just a touch, because I don't want to draw too much away from her. And then having that like idea of a bulb in the middle would be really good. And then what we could do, so make that a little. We could even then increase the character just a touch more, but this is really looking good. So I mean, it looks like I increased the green, but I'm trying to increase the warmth on her a little bit because I think that that could really help overall. But yeah, other than that, I think this is looking really good. I like and good use of reference here. TV lights. Like she looks brighter. Am I crazy? She looks brighter there than, yeah. Yeah, like more like this level. And then you can do the same thing on the lamp there and really make that a little bit brighter. In terms of this character, I think this character is looking good. I would maybe even increase the specular highlights just a little bit more. But yeah, I think that's looking really great overall. If you want like bonus points, you could also put like this is tricky, but like put a reflection of a TV in one of these frames. But then you'd have to like animate it along with the light, and that would be very, very tricky. So you may not necessarily need to do that, but I do think that could be a good step. But yeah, really great job on these overall. Forrest, very cool stuff. I do think the saturation has gone a little bit strong on the main character here. I'm actually liking her color a little bit more here. The background looks good, but I just think that we don't necessarily need to match those two things up perfectly. You can desaturate this a little bit because she's getting a little off hero color and into that realm. But really beautiful stuff otherwise. I think that's really good because it would just be a matter. I think that the character lighting looks a little better here with a little bit more of that brightness, and then I think this background looks a heck of a lot better. There's just more variation, more dynamic, more yeah, it's just more interest back there, and more of an idea that there's light emanating from this source and really kind of falling off that way. That is a terrible arrow. Let me draw that again like that. There we go. All right, cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That would be my next steps in there, and we can go from there. All right, next up we have Jenn. So Jenn, same deal. Looking really great. I love the updates. I think the darker background helps out a lot. I do think that we can cheat a little bit more light and a brighter face on this character here. Let's see. I think we can go a touch brighter. Again, just on her face, and again, not physically accurate. Like in no way would her face actually be this much brighter. But I do think that if we cheat that in there, we can kind of beautify her a little bit more, in that we're losing some of the darker shadows in there, and it makes her just more angelic, more just more of like a hero character. Additionally, I would say to soften a little bit of this light, just like a touch more, just increase the radius by 30% more, so that we can get some nice softening going across there. And let me just go ahead so you can see this. We can A/B this versus the original. So just like a little bit more in there. Again, we still have the contrast, we still have the darkness around her, but just by increasing the brightness on her face, we can get her to stand out just a touch more. I would also work to... There's a couple things that we can do with these flowers. I'm not quite sure which would be the best one. One would be to hit it a little stronger with key lights so that they're being hit by this warmer light. Another one would be to allow them to go a little bit darker and hit them more with like a bluish rim light on them. I'm struggling with which one I think would be better. But I think that you can try one of those two things and see what you like. Additionally, I do think that like some of this background, some of the color of the ground can go a little bit darker. You can even, if you have it as like a crypto matte, you can even take that down by like 20 or 30%, just because a darker ground will help ground the image a little bit and help make the base of the image feel a little bit, A, it'll be symmetric with what's going on here at the top, and B, it'll just make it feel a little bottom heavy visually, which will be good. All right, Jordan, you are up next. So great progress here again. Let's see if we can increase the eye whites a little bit. They're a little dark in there. Additionally, I also feel like well, there's two things. One is the key light feels a little neutral in tone. I would warm it up a little bit, just because I'm like, it just feels very neutral on these flowers back here. So I think we can warm it up. And then let's go ahead and get a bluish skylight in here to kind of fill in these shadows a little bit with some more cooler tones. Let's do those two things. well, I guess those three things, and see where we're at with the next iteration. And watch out, this could be a sharp shadow there. Just make sure that's soft, because we don't want to see shadow cast from individual hairs on her head. So increase that radius, give it some more color, and then we add a sky dome light in there to create some more contrast in those shadow regions there. Cat. Okay, cool. Good updates. I like this camera position better. It's more intimate. It's closer. We're more in touch with the character. So now we're looking at her pretty dead on, which means we got to get good shaping on her. And so you've got a key light coming in here from the screen right. We've got that light wash coming in. I see it going across from right to left. You may want to check the scale of your subsurface scattering, because it feels a little, she feels a little miniature, or like, you know, they start to feel a little bit like a gummy bear, in that this is really nice the way that the light is penetrating through her nostril, but it's a little bit much, and it makes it feel like she's very, very small. So the other thing that I'm intrigued by is that there's light, like her light is clearly this way, right? Clearly coming in from screen right. But everything else in the shot, it almost like, it feels like this light's going there, that this is casting a shadow that way, this is casting a shadow that way. It all feels like there's light coming in this way. And so I'm trying to balance the idea that it looks like, you know, it almost looks like there's light coming in from two directions. Although I'm realizing now that the fact that the screen right side of her face is illuminated, it looks like it's because of this shadow, not because of light coming in this way. Yeah. So I would say that light is flattening out the character. It's flattening things out a little bit too much. So the two things that I want you to work on for the next iteration are, let's swing that around more to either the right or left, because I want to see these. I want to, like, let's use this as a good shadow guide. I want that shadow either going like this way or like that way. I don't want it anywhere here in the middle, because that means that the light is coming in too frontally and not giving us enough shaping. Additionally, a good barometer of that is just how this is being lit, because this is almost like a light sphere that's in your set. So we want to feel that light is either coming from this side or this side. We want a light side and we want a dark side. We want the shaping on that. So I'll look at that even before I look at the character in the next iteration. And additionally, again, we've got very, very sharp shadows in here. So it's almost like an exact shadow of what's being cast. So it's like the same sharpness. Definitely increase that light's radius so we can get a softer version of that shadow on there. But yeah, this is coming along nicely, so feel good about that one. Nigel. All right, older version, newer version. That's much better. That's cool. God, it makes it feel like it's from the future. It's like future font. That's cool. I do like that better. I do think that works out really well. Let's leave that as is for now. I do think, like, I would say split the difference on the saturation level. I do like that you've gone less saturated, but I do feel like we could probably inch a little bit more. Like it just feels kind of like white, which is closer to what we want, but we do want a little bit of this value in here. So I would say split the difference 50-50. Got light coming in this way. I do, just because we're not outside, do feel like we can get darker on this fill side. Especially down in here. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have bounce light in there, but let's keep the light more on like her front and screen right side. Additionally, just watch out for sharper shadows in there. Again, let's open those up a little bit, make that radius a little bit wider. So for your next iteration, softer light on the character, less fill light, and split the difference on the volumetric light, so it's more in the middle there. All right, last and not least, we've got Jedi Rick with your update. This is integrating a little bit more nicely. This is interesting because the overall image is very desaturated. So like, I would expect, and again, not like that, more like this in terms of the values. But like if you want to do it that way, it's totally your call, whichever you prefer. But if we're having light outside, again, it's kind of what we were just talking about. So it's the opposite of what we were seeing in Nigel's here. So again, you know, because there's a little bit less, so because there is like you're surrounded by darkness and not by sky, you're gonna get less fill light in there. With this one, look how much like think of the sky as just a big blue dome light, a gigantic area light that's surrounding 180 degrees up above you, which means that there will be a lot of light kind of scattering around. And what you want to see is a little bit more of that blue light in here and bouncing around in that character as well. Additionally, I do think that you can push the key light a little bit more around to the screen right side and allow for a little bit more shaping, because right now like all of this is kind of the same, and I do think that you can push it around a little bit more and create a light side of the face and a dark side of the face where there's just like a little bit of light creeping over from the one side to the other. But this is looking much, much better. If you can render it with a slightly larger resolution, I know that we're just doing test sizes, but like this resolution is a little small to look at something and really get into seeing some of the detail. So if you can, if not, if you're constricted by CPU power, no problem at all. We can keep looking at this scale, just a kind of wish list item. Okay, everyone, that is all for today. My daughter and I thank you for joining us. She had a lot more to say today than she normally does, but I hope you guys, thank you guys for your patience on that. And I look forward to seeing what you have tomorrow. All right, happy lighting, everybody.